Well, good Tuesday morning. Thank you for joining us here for Live Impact News. Your time right now is 10:01 on 13 News Now Plus. My name is Eugene Daniel, joined in studio by producer Sarah Calloway and meteorologist Craig Moeller. We don't have anything to talk about, right, Craig? No.
Keep it moving.
Of course. Listen, he has a lot to discuss as we are looking ahead to the possibility of some more wintry weather coming up later this week. I do want to let you know we're monitoring a few things right now, including the final NTSB hearing on that deadly plane crash involving that passenger plane, that American Airlines plane, and the military helicopter a year ago, 2 days from now. That final hearing into what caused that mid-air collision that killed dozens of people. We will have a live look at that in just a minute. But first, I do want to get to you, Craig, because we're thinking now, as there are communities still here in Hampton Roads still having the effects of that snow and ice on the ground, another round could be coming later on this week. What's the time for it?
You know, we just had on the weather desk the fact that some places down across the Deep South have been without power from the ice storms for 4 days.
Yeah.
So this is becoming a very serious situation nationally. But that cold air that's in place, check this out, it is going to be with us throughout the week. You can take a look at the forecast here as I pop this for you. See that Canadian Arctic air sinking south and in over the southeastern U.S. Very, very cold air for the coming week, and that is going to set the stage for potential wintry weather as we get into the weekend. So I want to talk about this. Take a look at our winter storm chances for this weekend. The models are developing a coastal low. Call it a nor'easter, call it a coastal low, depending on where exactly its proximity is to the U.S. coastline. There's a good chance this thing is going to come close enough to throw moisture back into this really cold air that's already here, and that would produce potentially some heavier snow. Now, the coastal low is likely to take shape. All right, the models are all pointing to the development of this low pressure, but it hasn't happened yet. Okay, it's going to happen most likely maybe sometime Friday or Friday into early Saturday. This is a classic setup for heavy snow here in Hampton Roads. I used to go to school talks and kids would ask about, snow here. Oh, it never snows, or how do we get snow? The classic setup is to have cold air firmly in place, entrenched across our area, and then to have an area of low pressure, a coastal system, throw copious amounts of moisture into the sub-freezing temperatures that are going to be in place. And then you get that snow that develops. And if you get enough moisture, the snow can become quite heavy. So this is the setup here. Now, is it absolutely going to happen? There are still too many things that could happen one way or another for us to get super specific. As far as, well, what do you think? How much snow are we going to get? I'm not going to take a stab yet. I can tell you the models are going nuts, okay? I mean, super heavy amounts of snow. But I could also see the models completely flip-flopping if that low pressure track, which hasn't even formed yet, if that low pressure that's forecast to develop is another 50 or 75 miles off to the east, maybe a totally different situation. Here's what the Climate Prediction Center from NOAA is saying as far as hazards go into the weekend. Heavy snow for southeast Virginia and for eastern North Carolina. That's just for Saturday. Into Sunday, that spreads farther north and becomes a bigger area, but that's what the CPC has already put out as a hazard outlook. As we take a look at this, you see the two models. These are rings that we're showing. Those are isobars showing the development of the lows. The red is the European, the yellow modeling, which is right below the European, that's the American model, or the GFS. You see they both say, yeah, something's going to develop. The Euro is a little farther north and a little farther offshore. So the Euro is putting out about a third of the amount of snow that the GFS is doing, okay? Still a lot, but just that little subtle difference. You take a look at there at a glance, you go, well, they both are right there, right? Well, no. That's a big difference just there. And then you can see as it goes forward how the GFS is closer to the coast, right in a sweet spot. The Euro, the red one, is farther offshore. That's why we don't get nearly as much with that one. But that's how the two models play out. Let's give you a look at what this means in terms of what you might see on a radar, for instance. You see the outlook from the GFS showing that snow coming in Saturday late morning, and then really for Hampton Roads, more like into the afternoon as we go along. And I'm not quite sure why this is not advancing here. Has my computer lost communications? Let's see why it's not doing that. Hang on a second, guys. Yeah, I'm going to reset that model and see if that pops it up. Little technical thing. There you go. Okay, so you can see late morning and then into the afternoon and evening, you get that prolonged moderate to heavier snow. You see that, right? When you get, we're not talking about like the light white coloring on the maps. That's where you get like lighter snow showers. When you get into those deeper purples, that's pretty heavy snow. And it's not just there for an hour. It's going on for hours.
You know, it's interesting, not just with us with the potential for that, but I'm also thinking of our neighbors down south in North Carolina, that Raleigh area, and they're still dealing with some major issues too there when it comes to snow. And so we're looking at, you know, what's the saying? When it rains, it pours.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what it would be like in this case, though.
Yeah, when it snows, when
it snows,
yeah,
I don't know.
We'll work on something.
We'll work on something.
But what I will say with this, because it's funny, I was talking to my mom who's back in St. Louis, and they were digging out from like a foot of snow. They had a lot. But she was saying, oh my gosh, are we going to get hit with another one? No. Different situation. This would be something specifically for the mid-Atlantic down through the Carolinas and then up along the coast of the Northeast. You can see how the GFS kind of moves it along, and then it kind of winds down there as we go Sunday into Monday. Here's a look at the Euro. A little different in that it brings some snow chances in, even Friday evening late. Gets the snow started a little bit lighter, but in this case, it's a little slower in developing that low, and it's a little farther offshore, still producing some chances for pretty heavy snow into early Sunday, but it winds it down more quickly and is out of here by midday. So let's talk about why this is something that we're not saying, hey, we're absolutely going to get X amount of snow, or, you know, it's going to do this for sure. Honestly, we got to see this thing come together, right? It's not even out there. Okay, but the low should develop off the southeast coast. Now, if it takes that pink track, that first arrow, closer to the coast, we'll call it a coast runner or a coastal runner. That's similar to what we saw this past weekend. You remember what happened. We had more warm air, that quicker mix over, so that areas in Hampton Roads, many areas saw the snow overnight, got a couple inches or an inch or so, and then it got slushy and pretty much washed away. That's what happens if it's right along the coast and warmer air gets pulled into it, right? Still could see some heavy snow farther inland. It would be somebody else's problem. But in Hampton Roads and coastal sections of Virginia, North Carolina, that would be a little bit warmer scenario, wintry mix and rain. If it stays where the models have it right now, that pretty much leaves us in the sweet spot for snow and potentially lots of it. If it shifts a little farther to the east, and this is a big part of the uncertainty, if it just swings a little farther off, we could just get a glancing blow. Maybe it's not that bad. It's like, oh, you guys were calling for this and that, and that, it never happened. You know, it's possible.
You know, it's incredible to me, Craig, how the slightest difference, it appears, like when we're looking here at these three different potential tracks, the slightest difference could mean everything.
Oh, absolutely, Eugene. And that's what is challenging. I would say in some cases it's kind of fun as a forecaster to try to nail this, to try to say, okay, nature, what are you throwing at us? Okay, we'll see. Sometimes we're right. The modeling can be very good, and sometimes the modeling's out to lunch. We have to rely a little bit kind of on gut and experience and whatever, and sometimes you can throw it all out because, you know, nature sometimes has a way of doing its own thing. Let's talk about what we know and what we don't know yet, okay? You can take a look at this graphic here, Sarah. As we do, we are pretty confident low pressure is going to develop. Again, hasn't happened yet, won't happen still for probably 2 days, maybe 3 days before that low develops even. So we're basing a forecast on something that may or may not even happen. But we are pretty confident low pressure is expected to develop offshore. Now, what we also know is that cold air will absolutely be in place. It's going to get even chillier later this week. We'll talk more about that. Coming up, this is that classic setup for heavy snow in Hampton Roads. All of these things we know. If it plays out that way, we could get walloped. But you also have to keep in mind, we know that a small change will have big impacts in what we actually get. Those are the things that we know about this. Now, here's what we don't know. How strong is that low going to become? Is it going to become, a pretty healthy area of low pressure, or is it going to bomb out and become, a massive nor'easter? We don't really know that yet. The models have been kind of varying a little bit in the intensity. We don't know the exact timing of when the precipitation starts and stops, so that also has an effect on how much we see. The exact track of the lows I mentioned, if it's farther east, it's a glancing blow. If it's farther west, we get more rain or mix. So if it stays in the sweet spot, we get the snow, and the extent of the impacts are all a result of that. So we're not trying to be cheeky. We're not trying to play games holding back information. What we're saying is the setup is there for a significant winter event, but understanding full well that a lot can change between now and then.
Yeah, you can have the ingredients to make a good gumbo. Doesn't mean you'll make a good gumbo. When you say the exact time is uncertain at this point, are we talking exact time in terms of during a certain day by the hour, or are we talking which day?
It's most likely going to be Saturday into
Okay.
early Sunday.
Okay.
Now, again, the Euro was starting at late Friday night, earlier Saturday. The GFS was holding it back a little bit later in the afternoon. Most of the models have been suggesting more like a Saturday afternoon, evening thing into Sunday. So it's just going to be one of those things. If it slows down, it could be later, maybe even Saturday night. If it speeds up, it could get in, earlier in the morning on Saturday or Friday. We're not quite sure yet, but it does look like it's most likely going to be Saturday into Sunday.
Okay, so as we're kind of bracing or waiting for whatever that will potentially bring, we know one thing is here right now, Craig, and it is extremely cold right now outside. Yeah. Shoot, it's cold in the studio. We got Sarah over here. She told me not to mention it.
She's got her parka on. Go to the high wide. Look at that. It's a puffy jacket.
It's
so cold in
we
here.
are actually outside right now.
It is a little chilly in here.
It is chilly in here.
I don't mind. I don't mind the cooler air. And again, I put on a heavy tweed myself.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, you know what?
You knew, yeah.
Yeah, it's cold. So a lot of times I'll put a vest on when it's this cold. We did have a cold air advisory this morning because many areas saw single-digit wind chills early this morning. It is going to stay cold all week. That we also know, again, single-digit wind chills a possibility. And then we'll be tracking signals for tells with this weekend developing system. As we zoom in, Eugene, I just want folks to know we will see a lot of sunshine today. Temperatures generally mid-30s, maybe mid to upper 30s for a few spots down south, but low to mid-30s to the north. As we take a look, sunshine, plenty with our Thompson Creek Window Company sky views. Really beautiful up in Hampton right there. 23, though. How about that? Sarah, you're making a grimace face. What's that about?
It's almost disrespectful to have the sun icon next to that 23. I know what it means.
I want to know if Sarah can look into our high-wide camera there and make that face. What were you doing? She was doing the full scrunchy nose, snarled lip. Not here for it?
I just don't like extremes.
Yeah.
I can tolerate a little bit of cold, a little bit of heat, but
no extremes.
I understand.
Well, we did have those single digits, so it was extremely cold this morning. All right, as we go forward, we also want to mention small craft advisories up for the bay and the ocean. As we go through the afternoon, again, low to mid-30s right on the water, mid to upper 30s for some inland areas. I think mid-30s for the peninsula, middle peninsula, eastern shore, low to mid-30s. Plenty of sunshine, that slightly warmer air. And I say slightly, like 2 degrees warmer for North Carolina. Bottom line is it is cold across the region. Overnight tonight, lows near 20, mainly clear. Again, we're going to see teens inland, Eugene. Eugene, make sure your battery's in good working order tomorrow.
Okay.
You going to come clean?
Okay, my car didn't start this morning. Sarah, I guess I didn't tell you that as well. This has happened before. I think maybe last year or the year before last, we hit a really cold hit, and my car just wouldn't start. It's a
Yeah.
newer car. I've taken it to the shop. They say nothing's wrong with
Yeah.
it, but for some reason, when I hit certain temperatures, every once in a while, it will not start.
You
So
know-
That used to happen
that
to me.
happened to me this morning.
It's like at some point I was just like, I think I just need to replace the battery completely.
I did that.
Oh,
So
okay.
now I have to take it to see, okay, what else could
What
it
else
be?
is
Yeah,
going on?
what else could
well,
be?
it's interesting. Other parts of the country that frequently deal with this, and other
Mm-hmm.
parts of the world, Northern Europe, you get up into Scandinavia, they have engines with heating blocks in them to keep them
Makes
warm that you
sense.
actually plug in.
Yeah.
Not to recharge them, but to just keep them
Keep them.
warm. That's one of the other things. You talk about things like diesel engines. You have to do fuel additives because the diesel can go bad if it gets too cold. And also some of the electric vehicles, that was also a concern when you get super
makes
cold
sense.
temperatures. They don't perform quite as well. All right, we're going to take a quick look at the 7-day forecast here again. Cold weather Friday into the upcoming weekend, then some snow as we have that potential Saturday into Sunday. Guys, we'll be keeping a close eye to it, and we'll let you know as we get closer to the weekend.
All right, Craig, we appreciate you. And I will say this, if you are going to be outdoors in Hampton Roads, bundle up. I know
Yes,
we're kind
sir.
of keeping it a little bit light here towards the end, but seriously, make sure that you are taking care of yourself. You talked about my car. I was out there trying to get that situated, but even in that short amount of time, man, my
You can
hands
feel it.
were absolutely in pain. Because I didn't have my gloves on when I was trying to get that situated. We're going to have so much more with Live Impact News on the other side of a quick break, so stick with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking with us here for Live Impact News. If you're watching us on YouTube Live, remember you can also download our streaming app, 13 News Now Plus, for your TV. You can find us on Roku, Amazon Fire, and on Apple TV for free there. We were just talking about the frigid temperatures hitting us here in Hampton Roads, but really all of Virginia right now in a very tragic situation in the Richmond area. We know now that a toddler has died after falling into a pond yesterday afternoon. Henrico police got a call about this child who had been pulled out of the water on Shoreview Drive just before 2 o'clock yesterday. Now, when medics got there, they say the boy was unconscious and was receiving CPR. They rushed him to a hospital, and unfortunately, that boy later died. Now, we've been telling people on air this morning on Daybreak that when you get to a temperature like this, you might see frozen ponds out there. And, I think that that's a fun thing to do, maybe to go out there on the pond. But we spoke to some experts who say, listen, it is not cold enough long enough for those ponds to freeze enough for you to be able to have your weight sustained on them. And if you find yourself in a situation like that, or you see someone, they are telling people not to jump in, to call 911 right away, use a rope or use a sweater, something thick, to try to pull an individual out. This scenario is a part of why they're telling people to do that, because first responders also found a man at the scene and treated him for possible hypothermia, which, you know, you can imagine someone likely trying to jump in and save and rescue the boy. So just a terrible scenario. There's a lot of details that have not come out yet. We don't know how the child got into the water or any of the circumstances surrounding it. But we do know that toddler unfortunately died after falling into that body of water yesterday. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that and heard the warnings from the experts. We're going to switch gears a little bit to something I told you about at the top of the stream that we were monitoring. It is almost a year. On Thursday, it will have been a year since that deadly mid-air collision at Reagan National Airport. This was the mid-air collision between the American Airlines flight and the military helicopter that killed more than 60 people. 67 people died. 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board the passenger plane, and then 3 soldiers on the helicopter died, making it the deadliest American aircraft collision in about 20 or so years. Now, right now, NTSB is holding its final hearing on the findings into what led up to that crash. They've already said several factors contributed to it, including the fact that the helicopter was flying 78 feet higher than it should have been. Now, this is another thing that we've learned since all of this has unfolded within the last year, that the airport reportedly had 85 near misses in the 3 years prior to this crash. It's been a very big issue that has been spoken about even prior to the collision by certain lawmakers, including Virginia Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, who have warned about something happening and too much traffic around Reagan National for years now. So with that, let's go ahead and listen in to this live hearing that is taking place right now by NTSB into the cause of that deadly DCA crash.
Regarding staffing of the helicopter control position had changed several times over the years, becoming less restrictive each time. During prescribed hours, the policy went from helicopter control must be open in 2016 and only authorized to be combined with air traffic manager or support manager approval, to 2023 becoming helicopter control must normally be decombined, meaning staffed separately. Then in 2024, it became helicopter control should normally be decombined, and it authorized the positions to be combined at the supervisor or controller in charge level's discretion. The softening in this policy from helicopter control must be open to helicopter control should normally be decombined, with no requirement of a corresponding log entry or rationale, opened the policy up for varied interpretation. On the day of the accident, the helicopter position had been open or staffed separately for less than 1.5 hours the entire day, and had been combined with local control for more than 5 hours leading up to the time of the accident. There was no requirement to log the combining of helicopter and control positions, nor any position combination at DCA Tower. Staff have proposed one recommendation to the FAA in this area. We will now show an animation and will pause for those who would like to leave the room or turn away from their screens. The animation will play for approximately 3 minutes. We will be dimming the lights in the boardroom so that people can see the animation better. This photograph from the interior of the DCA Air Traffic Control Tower shows the view to the southeast across the Potomac River. Traffic displays can be seen overhead. The traffic displays can be moved to suit the needs of the staff in the tower. This animation presents a simulated view from the tower. The point of view was based on the local controller's recollection of his position. The local controller could have changed position or orientation slightly on the night of the accident. The underlying animation was produced by the Federal Aviation Administration Target Generation Facility Simulation Branch. A dark gray structural mask generated from a three-dimensional laser scan of the tower conducted by NTSB staff is overlaid on the scene. Audio recordings of air traffic control communications are synchronized with the animation. Local controller broadcasts are shown in text at lower left. Aircraft broadcasts are shown in text at lower right.
American 16, turn to 1 star 320 to 14, go to 5, traffic 2 mile elevation, runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Multiple 70 request. Most of you said route for zone 6. Multiple 7 approved.
American 472, good evening, Aircare 1's within a single medevac helicopter 1,000 feet, 29901 on the altimeter, requesting zone 6 for Fairfax.
Medevac Aircare 1, Washington Star, National altimeter 29900. Approved through Washington class, Robert Space, Portland, Sheridan, Fairfax. Pass 25, the CRJ in sight. Pass 25, pass behind the CRJ.
65 has a aircraft in sight, precision separation.
Miss Shepard.
American 472, my path number, visual.
American 472, Washington Star, 1 star 2017.
The animation has completed playing.
We're going to come back to this in just a few moments. We need to take another quick break, but on the back end of this, we're going to share more of this live hearing by the NTSB on that deadly crash in the DC area. Okay, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us here on the other side of that break for live Impact News here for 13 News Now. Plus, we're going to go back to the hearing that is taking place right now in Washington, D.C. NTSB giving its final findings in the one-year mark of that deadly midair collision at Reagan National Airport. So let's go ahead and head right back into it.
Issued a safety alert. which would have included updated traffic advisory information and an alternate course of action if feasible. Neither were done in this case. Had a safety alert been issued, it would have increased the situation awareness of both crews and alerted them of their closing proximity to one another. Additionally, a timely safety alert may have allowed action to be taken by one or both crews to avert the collision. Positive control is defined by the FAA as the separation of all air traffic within designated airspace by air traffic control. And other FAA guidance included elements of positive control as taking command of control situations and not acting in a hesitant or unsure manner, and that a controller exercising positive control observes present and considers forecasted traffic to predict task overload and takes appropriate action to prevent or lessen the situation. Positive control was not exercised at all times on the night of the accident. Had the local controller exercised appropriate positive control with timely safety alert on the evening of the accident, one or both flight crews may have been able to take action in time to avert the collision. Thank you. Dr. Wilson will now continue with her presentation.
Good morning. I will discuss DCA air traffic control tower use of visual separation on the night of the accident, the concept of situation awareness, combining the local control and helicopter control positions, recognition of impending collision and expectation-driven process, the conflict alert system, radio communications when the local control and helicopter control positions are combined, time on position limitations, threat and error management, and risk management. Given the proximity of helicopter routes and zones to the approach and departure corridors for fixed-wing traffic, applying pilot-applied visual separation reduced controller workload and airspace congestion and complexity. As such, DCA ATC tower controllers were motivated to provide a traffic advisory and authorize visual separation for helicopters transiting DC airspace as early as possible. The local controller's expectation that PAT 25 crew had Flight 5342 in sight was not necessarily valid. As a result, there was potential for the local controller to overestimate the level of traffic awareness the PAT 25 crew had and to underestimate the level of information and assistance they might subsequently require to ensure collision avoidance. Situation awareness forms a basis for decision making. Situation awareness is not only what the controller is perceiving in the current air traffic situation, but how they interpret that information and use it to project the future state of traffic moving in their airspace. Controllers must maintain awareness of each aircraft they are managing to include, for example, location, altitude, and airspeed, and anticipate where the aircraft will be in the seconds and minutes to follow. A controller's ability to maintain situation awareness is impacted by task and environmental factors, such as their workload and divided attention, and individual factors such as training and experience. As cognitive capacity is reduced, for example, with increasing workload due to increasing traffic complexity, traffic volume, and/or frequent radio communications, a controller's ability to maintain situation awareness is reduced. Because the local control and helicopter control positions were combined, the local controller was responsible for coordinating arrivals and departures, as well as VFR helicopter traffic transiting DCA airspace. In a post-accident interview, the local controller stated that he felt a little overwhelmed about 10 to 15 minutes before the accident when the traffic volume increased to 10 aircraft, consisting of 5 airplanes and 5 helicopters. But he felt the volume was manageable when 1 or 2 helicopters left the airspace. About 90 seconds before the collision, the traffic volume increased to a maximum of 12 aircraft, consisting of 7 airplanes and 5 helicopters. Radio communication showed that the local controller was shifting his focus between airborne, ground, and transiting aircraft. Keeping the local control and helicopter control positions combined on the night of the accident increased the local controller's workload and reduced his situation awareness. Controllers routinely monitor the current state of an aircraft and predict its future location in relation to other aircraft. Conflicts that develop slowly, particularly at night, are inherently difficult for people to recognize due to reduced visual cues. Gradual change can reduce situation awareness and delay recognition. The local controller expected that PAT 25 would remain clear of Flight 5342 because the PAT 25 instructor pilot stated that he had the airplane in sight and would maintain visual separation. The frequent use of pilot-applied visual separation reinforces the expectation that the pilot of one aircraft will maintain separation from another aircraft. Because it has repeatedly worked as expected, it can be more difficult for a controller to notice deviations, especially when workload is high, like on the night of the accident. The conflict alert system acts as a safety net designed to draw a controller's attention to a potential conflict using an oral alert, a flashing red CA on the Certified Tower Radar Display, or CTRD, and a conflict list on the CTRD indicating in red the aircraft involved. The image on the right depicts the red conflict alert that appeared for the accident aircraft. Conflict alerts are presented the same regardless of the severity of the conflict. Conflict alert activation is common at DCA ATC Tower. NTSB staff are concerned that frequent nuisance alerts may desensitize controllers to the alerts and lead to slower reaction time. Providing controllers with additional salient cues regarding the severity of a potential conflict would reduce controller cognitive load and likely improve response time. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA in this area. The DCA ATC tower utilized a discrete frequency for communicating with helicopters to avoid interference and frequency congestion, even when the local control and helicopter control positions were combined. Separate frequencies also made the process of decombining the helicopter and local control positions easier. When the local control and helicopter control positions were combined, airplane and helicopter pilots could hear all transmissions made by the controller. However, transmissions made by helicopters were not audible to airplanes, and transmissions made from airplanes were not audible to helicopters. This alleviated frequency congestion. However, pilots reported that hearing all transmissions would improve their situation awareness. Staff have proposed 1 recommendation to the FAA in this area. The operations supervisor had been working on a control position for over 4 hours at the time of the accident and had been working on the operations supervisor position specifically for the 2 hours before the accident. Given his extended time on position, it is likely that the operations supervisor was experiencing reduced alertness at the time of the accident, which decreased his ability to effectively assess operational risks. The collective bargaining agreement between the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, or NATCA, and the FAA require relief opportunities for all operational staff. However, the agreement does not cover supervisory personnel, and there are no mandatory relief periods for supervisors. Staff have proposed 1 recommendation to the FAA in this area. Threat and error management originated in the human factors literature and was first applied in flight deck operations before being applied in air traffic control. Threat and error management, or TEM, is a process for identifying safety risks in the environment, analyzing those risks, and minimizing or mitigating those risks. In November 2016, the NTSB issued Safety Recommendation A-16-51, asking the FAA to provide initial and recurrent training for air traffic controllers on controller judgment, vigilance, and/or safety awareness, with specific reference to 2 mid-air collisions that occurred in 2015. In July 2017, the FAA responded that instruction on threat and error management was being delivered to controllers as part of 2017 instructor-led recurrent training and would be required training for future controllers. A review of training records for controllers involved in the accident did not indicate that they received TEM training in 2017, nor were controllers familiar with the term threat and error management during post-accident interviews. TEM training can strengthen situation awareness, promote team communication, emphasize effective scanning habits, help in recognizing patterns and developing adverse events, and enhance decision-making under stress. TEM training would also benefit controllers performing supervisory duties who are responsible for overseeing facility operations and making operational decisions, such as when to combine or decombine control positions. Staff have proposed one recommendation to the FAA in this area. When making operational decisions, supervisors must balance safety and risk management with the operational demands of the facility. The DCA ATC Tower Standard Operating Procedures did not provide guidance or make a tool available to support supervisors in identifying risks, analyzing the impact of risks, prioritizing risks based on the likelihood and impact, or developing strategies to reduce or eliminate risks. A real-time risk assessment or decision-making tool would have likely benefited the operations supervisor in identifying and mitigating the operational risk factors that were present on the night of the accident. Staff have proposed one recommendation to the FAA in this area. Thank you. Dr. Cayugo will now continue with his presentation.
Good morning.
We're going to take another break here and come back with more from this hearing. So just give us a few moments and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thanks for watching Live Impact News here on 13 News Now. Plus, we want to bring your attention to something that we just saw pop up live here. This is out of Indiana, where there are new details being shared after 5 people were charged in connection to the shooting of a judge and his wife at their home. One of those people arrested is a man who was about to go on trial in a case overseen by that judge. Now, authorities have now popped up. I just want to let you know that we're seeing it on our big board at the moment. We're recording that. We'll monitor it to bring you the latest information on that. But of course, we are watching live the final NTSB hearing into that deadly midair collision in D.C. just a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, 2 days from now. So we're going to go back to that live for those who've been watching that, and we'll have more information about some of the other things going on a bit later.
As soon as possible, and to not conduct alcohol testing at all, violated DOT requirements. The ATO's delayed and inappropriate drug and alcohol testing determination was due in part to inadequate ATO staff understanding of the DOT's requirements for timely testing. Staff also found that the ATO's initial event response procedures are inadequately designed to meet requirements for timely testing. Because the ATO procedures dictate that the drug and alcohol testing determination be made concurrently with the services rendered telephone conference. The SRT is a management review to assess air traffic services associated with an event and does not take place until after multiple time-consuming administrative and initial investigative actions, including notifying and convening various personnel and preparing audio communications and radar display information for playback. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA and 1 to the DOT in this area. This concludes my presentation, and we are now ready to answer your questions.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Banning, and certainly Mr. Soper, Dr. Wilson, and Dr. Kayaville for your excellent and thorough presentations. As I mentioned at the outset, there's a lot of information in the report, substantially more information than we're able to present in even a day's time. So we have had the pleasure of reviewing your work, your in the draft, and appreciate that. I have a question. I have a lot of questions in this area, but one I want to start with. Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport opened in 1941. Runway 1533 was part of the airport's original configuration since it opened. The Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart was published in 1986, maybe went through one small change to add a compulsory reporting point around Wilson Bridge. Between 1991 and the time of the accident, there had been changes to route altitudes and police zone boundaries, but not any substantial changes to the route. You mentioned that the routes were never designed to ensure separation in your presentation. Yet we know over time concerns were raised repeatedly, went unheard, squashed, however you want to put it, stuck in red tape and bureaucracy of a very large organization, somehow didn't make it up. Repeated recommendations over the years, so much so that DC Tower took it upon themselves to create a helicopter working group because they had concerns. How is it that no one, absolutely no one, in the FAA did the work to figure out there was only 75 feet, at best, 75 feet of vertical separation between a helicopter on Route 4 and an airplane landing on runway 33? How is it nobody, until we did this investigation?
That's a great question. And we've asked the same question amongst staff, and that's precisely why we have recommended the assessment of these helicopter routes, not just what was there at the time, but everything that exists today for this airport. They've conducted others, but we're focused on this one right here. So we have recommended that in our recommendations.
Yeah, in fact, in our findings of our urgent recommendation report, we stated existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision. I'm going to ask Mr. Banning and Mr. LeBaron, your pilots, is there anywhere in our airspace that 75 feet of vertical separation is acceptable?
I'd say not to me, as a pilot.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it wasn't until Ms. Moeller and others mapped it out, thank you for your work, that we figured it out. Yet years of nobody listening. Opportunities too. So I'm going to ask, FAA order states that terminal operations service area directors are responsible for conducting annual reviews of existing helicopter route charts to determine their accuracy and continued utility. Do we have any evidence that these annual reviews were conducted?
No, we do not. We asked for that information and they were unable to provide that nor identify the individual that you just named.
Right.
Since then, it has been changed to the air traffic manager responsible for those, but at the time of this event, it was that individual that you named, and we have no evidence of any of it.
Do we even know who the terminal, so we have no idea who the Terminal Operations Service Area Director is for the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart. That was the requirement, and the person responsible for conducting these annual reviews at that time.
That's correct. We do not know, and as of 2 days ago, the FAA responded in the same manner. They did not either.
The FAA had no idea who a terminal, Terminal Operations Service Area Director was. Who was responsible for conducting annual reviews, ensuring the safety of helicopters transiting the airspace around DCA. No idea who that was. Yeah. So we invited an individual to our hearing from the mapping office to our investigative hearing to discuss the route, to discuss annual reviews, and discuss any sort of proposal. Turns out, we learned after the hearing, she wasn't the right person to invite. We should have invited this Terminal Operations Service Area Director that nobody at FAA could figure out who that was. Was FAA a party to this hearing?
Yes, they were.
What is required of parties to the hearing when we come to a hearing? For example, are they part of the planning of the hearing, and would they go through the witnesses and list of witnesses with us and possibly be required to identify when we have the wrong witness?
Absolutely. Their responsibility is to advise us on the correct witness for the correct subject area.
Did FAA raise this with us at all, that this was not the right person to question at the time?
They did not. They actually provided this person to us.
They provided this person to us that could not answer any of our questions at the hearing regarding annual reviews, probably because they had no idea who a Terminal Operations Service Area Director was. Thank you. That runs out my 5 minutes, so turning to member, I am so sorry, Mike Graham.
It's been a long few weeks, hasn't it? I'd like to direct these questions to Mr. Soper, and I'm going to ask you some questions about the primary duties and responsibilities for the different control positions in the control tower as they relate to the DCA ATC tower information outlined in their SOP. As a former controller yourself, I want you to share your perspective on which duty or responsibility is most important for each of the following positions. What would that be for the local controller?
According to the DCA's SOP, Air Traffic Control Tower's SOP, the local controller must provide initial separation between successive departures and arrivals, and provide separation between arrivals and departures in those aircraft operating under their jurisdiction airspace.
That's their primary duty.
Yes.
How about the helicopter controller?
The helicopter control, according to the SOP, is to separate VFR traffic from the DCA arrivals and departures or fixed wing traffic, issue safety alerts and traffic advisories as required, and to clear VFR aircraft on routes or into zones as depicted on the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart.
How about the assistant local controller?
They are there exactly like you might think, to alert the local controller or assist and alert the local controller of any unusual situations or developing traffic conflicts, maintain surveillance of the local traffic pattern and landing areas, and utilize visual memory aids when required to help them not miss anything, and assist the local control in monitoring aircraft in their airspace as well as on the CTRD or the control tower radar display.
And how about the primary duty and responsibility for the operations supervisor?
The operations supervisor provides operational supervision and directs the tower operation to ensure an efficient flow of air traffic, making necessary notifications of suspected operational errors, pilot deviations, near midair collision reports, other incidents requiring notifications, combining and decombining of positions in accordance with criteria outlined in their SOP.
Thank you. Can you share a brief summary of how the decision was supposed to be made according to the SOP in effect at the time of the accident to combine or decombine the local and helicopter control positions?
Yes, in the SOP, it outlined that the supervisor or controller in charge at their discretion, though it stated, let me start out first with, it stated that the helicopter position must normally be decombined. So normally it should be decombined during these core hours, period. If the supervisor or CIC has a need to combine or decombine, if they were already combined, the positions there to consider, they have a list of 7 things, which I can list here for you: the weather conditions, VIP movements, special helicopter operations, training initiatives, staffing constraints, air carrier traffic volume, helicopter traffic volume within the DCA Class Bravo. So when making a decision to combine or decombine, they should be taking all of these into account.
And who makes that decision to combine or decombine?
At that time, it was the operations supervisor.
Okay. If they were to decombine it, which they were not at the time of the accident, did they have enough personnel on the tower to do it?
They did.
They did. Okay. So based on the procedures and
You are listening live right now to the NTSB's final hearing on that deadly DCA collision a year ago. 67 people dying in that mid-air crash between an American airline passenger plane and a military helicopter. We'll have more on this and other topics right after this quick break. Thank you for sticking with us here for Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. We are monitoring a few different things happening live right now. We've been showing you the live NTSB hearing on that deadly midair collision a year ago in the Washington, D.C. area. But right now we want to turn our attention to something that is happening in Indiana, where officials are giving an update into a shooting of a judge and his wife inside their home. 5 people now in custody, including a man who was set to be on trial under that judge. So we're getting new information about this. This happened just days ago, but just moments ago, officials there in Indiana wrapped up a press conference. We're going to play a little bit about that now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do want to note, thank you for the kind words of support, that the mayor was engaged in this from the very beginning. At briefings, all the briefings that we had, even into the night, staying late for when we carried out our arrest plan. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your support. We live in a place where we have great leadership with our city council and with our entire community. So again, it starts at the top. Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Galloway, Galloway. I'm the police chief for Lafayette Police Department. And I want to, just like the mayor said, I want to welcome members of the media who traveled here from Indianapolis or wherever, and also our local media members. Thank you for being here. This is an important thing that we're here to discuss. And I want to start by saying, kind of like the mayor mentioned, we are proud of our city, and I'm deeply proud of the men and women of the Lafayette Police Department. They stand dedicated at keeping this community safe every single day. The arrests made in this case are a result of the combined effort involving multiple local, state, and federal agencies. Across the board, this was a lion-hearted effort. This investigation never stopped. The response from law enforcement was tenacious, focused, and unrelenting. The personnel of the Lafayette Police Department, utilizing every skill, resource, and technical advantage at their disposal, worked with sheer will to develop probable cause necessary to remove these 5 people from our streets. In doing so, they secured the very justice to which Judge Meyer has dedicated his entire life. This was a true partnership alongside the Indiana State Police, the FBI, and the vital support of our Tippecanoe County Sheriff's Department, West Lafayette Police Department, and Purdue University Police Department. Thank you for assisting us and giving us resources that we needed to get these violent criminals off the street. We must remember why we are here today. For Judge Meyer and his wife, this is personal. They are not just public officials. They are pillars of this community who have dedicated decades of their life to public service. They are kind, generous people who embody the values of Lafayette. While we are heartened that Judge Meyer and his wife are on the road to recovery, we recognize that this attack was more than an assault on 2 citizens. To me and every law enforcement leader on the stage and the people they serve, this was an assault on the rule of law itself. By targeting members of the judiciary, these individuals didn't just attack a person, they attempted to strike the very foundation of our justice system and the safety of our entire community. I want to extend a sincere thanks to Prosecutor Harrington, as attorneys, and as investigators in his major crimes unit. They worked alongside us 24 hours a day, drafting warrants, subpoenas, providing critical investigative insights, and meticulously constructing a comprehensive probable cause affidavit that brought us to this point. We do now have a little bit of a video to show you, and I can kind of narrate through this. This is to provide insight of the scale of this operation. We're going to provide footage regarding the apprehension of the suspects, Raylan Ferguson, Thomas Moss, and Blake Smith. It's critical to recognize these arrests were synchronized in a single operation, coordinated across multiple agencies and jurisdictions that all occurred simultaneously. So we can show this, and I can kind of narrate a little bit as we go through. Get this started.
Okay, again, that is coming out of Indiana, where a judge and his wife were shot inside of their home, and 5 people now in custody. One of the people in custody is a person who was set to go on trial before that judge for some violent offenses. And so you see there that officials are beginning to give out some information. We're going to try to come back to that, but we have a different topic that we want to touch on right now, because we do have a special guest with us at the moment here on Live Impact News. There's a new nationwide report from the National Council of Teacher Quality that is showing a concerning disconnect between the needs of teachers in the workforce and state policies designed to support them, specifically talking about paid parental leave. Here to tell us a little bit more about this study and some of the concerns and questions out of that is the president of the National Council on Teacher Quality, Heather Pesky. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's get into the findings first, okay? Again, we're specifically looking at paid parental leave for teachers. What did this study find in terms of what teachers are saying they're either getting or not getting enough of?
Well, we looked across the nation, and what we found is that 35 states, including Virginia, do not presently offer guaranteed paid parental leave to teachers for 12 full weeks. And what teachers are saying is this is making it very difficult for them when they have to make choices about their own families and whether or not to have children themselves. So we're really urging Virginia to pass policy to supply teachers with access to 12 full weeks of paid parental leave so that they don't have to make this terrible choice between their students and having children themselves.
And when you talk about the impact this can have on teachers, you were just sharing, the impact it could also have on education and students. Can you kind of spell that out for people when you have this kind of need for teachers? How does that trickle down into the education aspect of it?
That's right. Well, what happens is that teachers, when they don't have access to paid parental leave, we know that many of them are making this terrible choice about whether to support their own families or whether to continue in a profession that they love. And so right now in Virginia, we know that about 1,000 teachers leave the profession each year. And they explain that they leave for personal reasons, some of which are likely connected to paid parental leave. So we're really urging lawmakers in Virginia to pass paid parental leave policy for all teachers, providing them with 12 weeks to be home with their families, to be bonding and connecting to their children, their new children, and really to be able to not just sustain teachers, but ultimately to benefit children.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be a major issue when we're talking about, and we've reported on teacher burnout and then also for teacher shortages as well. Okay, so there's 2 states currently that offer 12 weeks of fully paid parental leave for teachers. First off, what are some of the differences we may see in those states? And then what are the most realistic steps that other states might be able to take in order to provide this for teachers?
Well, the 2 states right now that provide access to fully paid parental leave for 12 weeks are Delaware and Arkansas, which are 2 very different states. But what we see is that voters support these policies. 80% of people, when they were polled, said that they support paid parental leave. So the place to start is for lawmakers to require that districts provide 12 weeks of paid parental leave for teachers. Then second is for the state to help support districts to support the costs of substitute teachers when the teachers are out on leave. And finally, we're really urging lawmakers to include all parents, fathers, adoptive parents, foster parents, as well as people who give birth to children in these paid parental leave policies, so that we're supporting teachers, we're attracting and retaining them with these policies, we're supporting and strengthening families, and ultimately, we're really supporting and growing our children.
You mentioned there at the tail end of that answer, Heather, you were talking about that it should include fathers, adoptive parents, and others within the group. Can you go a little bit deeper into why that matters in this case?
That's right. Well, we know that lots of experts, including pediatricians, including healthcare experts, including educators, and families themselves. I mean, you have a lot of parents who are probably watching this broadcast who are probably nodding. It's really important for children to be able to connect with their fathers. And if you adopt a child or if you're a foster parent, it's also important that you get access to the time that you need with your baby or with your new child, welcoming your child into your family.
Again, this is the president of the National Council on Teacher Quality, Heather Pesky, joining us right now. If people are listening, you were just talking about parents probably hearing this, nodding their heads at the moment, and they want to get more information about this. Where can they go and to either learn more about some of the issues you all have kind of uncovered and ways in which they can either themselves advocate and push for change?
To learn more, you can go to the National Council on Teacher Quality's website. Our website is nctq.org.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. And before we let you go here, is there anything else you really wanted to make sure that our viewers heard when it came to this topic, either from the survey that you all were able to gather that information about or about this general topic? I want to make sure I give you the floor.
Well, I want your viewers to know that for the cost of a cup of coffee in Virginia for each taxpayer, you would be able to provide 12 weeks of paid parental leave to teachers. So I really urge you to support teachers, invest in Virginia's families, and ultimately help support children across the state of Virginia.
Heather, we appreciate you for joining us here on Live Impact News. We'll have to have you back at another time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Absolutely. You as well. So you hear it from her there, right? The findings of this report and how you can find more information about it, as that conversation and that topic, a big one amongst educators, and the opportunity here in Virginia as we now have new leadership in the state, Democrats controlling the House, Senate, and with new Governor Abigail Spanberger in the mix there. So interesting findings. I wanted to make sure that we got that in. It was great that we were able to get Heather in to talk about it as well. We'll probably post that up on either our website or on our other platforms for people to be able to see it for themselves. With that, Sarah, I think we can go back to, we'll go back to the NTSB hearing. It is still going on right now. It's live at the moment. Okay, do we need to take a quick break? We'll take a quick break, and on the back end of that, we'll go back to the NTSB hearing, again, of that deadly midair collision now that it's been 1 year since it happened in the Washington, D.C. area. Okay, welcome back here. You are watching Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. We are going to go back to that live hearing right now. NTSB giving its final findings 1 year after that deadly collision in Washington, D.C. between that American Airlines passenger plane and a military helicopter. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Loading and back-end loading and all that. My final question for this round here is, if we put this all together, what impact does a higher arrival rate than an airport can sustain, less alternatives to offload traffic due to larger aircraft, and compressed airline scheduling have on air traffic controllers?
It increases all of their workload and increases risk.
And it also makes them have to do squeeze plays and make it work?
A lot of mitigation activities.
Okay, thank you.
Member Inman.
So in that regard, we heard some testimony earlier that the local controllers stated they were a little overwhelmed about 15 minutes before the actual crash. But then we also heard that 90 seconds before the volume had actually increased. How does a controller get out of that situation?
The controller could have asked to have the positions decombined.
And I guess from a practical point of view, you've got people that are in the tower working at that moment, and then you've got people that are in a break room that are several floors below. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if I'm in 90 seconds, my volume picks up, and I say I need help, how long is it going to take to get somebody up there to help them?
It could take minutes. But he could also rely on the assistant local control and also the operations supervisor to act as extra set of eyes and to assist in any way that they could in terms of monitoring traffic until somebody could get up there for relief.
But the assistant local controller was already supposed to be the other set of eyes, right?
She was an extra set of eyes, yes. Had she known that the controller was overloaded and needed help, she also could have potentially stopped writing down helicopter information and also started monitoring traffic for him if he felt that there was an area that she needed to focus on.
And in this case, the role of that supervisor is to be monitoring all of this. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what role did they have in monitoring this? They were on station for 4 hours, and I know we kind of talked about that, but in this case, the supervisor should be the one who starts to realize it before anyone else, right?
Yes, which is why we've recommended the threat and error management training, which we believe would help with that, as well as a risk assessment tool that they can use in real time.
So is that supervisor one that actually received it out of the 5?
He received a workshop with that same name a year or two before. I think it was 2014. So it was technically before the 2017 response that we had from the FAA. So we don't know what was included in his 2014 training.
And so it sounds like he's been around for a long time.
He was hired in 2011.
Okay. I guess how does someone monitor whether a supervisor is actually actively supervising?
There would be no one there, I guess, in real time monitoring the supervisor.
So there's no real way of knowing that these supervisors are actively engaging unless it's brought up in other reviews. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to go to and this is for a reference for later, and I've got a reference that we can pull up, and I don't know if we need it. And I think, Brian, 14 CFR 91.123, whenever it talks about ATC clearance obtained. Great, thank you. It says no pilot in command may deviate from that clearance unless an amended clearance is obtained and an emergency exists or the deviation is in response to a traffic alert and collision avoidance system resolution advisory. So I guess my question is, in that regard, we're going to talk about TCAS and ADSB later, but in this instance, if they had gotten some type of warning, the pilots, could they have made any change? Or does it have to be what ATC actually tells them?
Now, the pilot is always in final command of the aircraft, and in that case, I think we're talking about a traffic advisor or a collision avoidance alert to them with resolution advisory, and in that case, it meets that exactly where they will respond to that and they can break away from that clearance.
Okay, and we may get to that in the next section. Do we know what the ATC scope showed at the time that this incident occurred? Because I know we've had discussions about whether it rounds up and rounds down.
Yes, air traffic altitudes displayed on radar are rounded to the nearest 100 feet. And at the time of the closest time to impact that we can see there, the helicopter was shown at 300 and the CRJ was shown at 200. Wait a minute,
Do you have that reversed?
I got that wrong, hold on. Let me check that. We can look and check on that, but essentially we believe that the CRJ showed above the helicopter, but the helicopter climbed right just before impact. It showed a climb from 200 to 300. I do know that.
Okay, so we can go on the next round. You can maybe answer that for me if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to, I've been asked a lot about staffing. Obviously, we felt that you determined the tower was adequately staffed, though Certainly the workload was significant given positions were combined, but I do want to provide, I asked the staff to check based on September 29th, 2025 versus, today. I think we looked at January 5th, 2026 and what those numbers were. And I'm just going to go for, certainly there are more authorized positions, but I think I'm going to focus on who was operational, meaning numbers of people available to work that are working in the tower, not what's authorized, but that are working on the tower. And so, by my, the draft report shows for certified professional controllers on January 29th, operational was 25. Today, 20. Traffic management coordinators, they had 2, today 0. Operational. Operations supervisors, 4 on that date today, or as of January 5th, 3 operational. Operations managers, 1 on January 29th, 2025. Just a few weeks ago, 2. Support manager, 1 at that time, now 2. Air traffic manager, still at 1 temporary, was what existed on January 29, 2025. Today, still 1 temporary. Staff support specialists, although authorized to have 3, there are 0. So by my calculations, you actually have a lower number of personnel today that are operational in the tower than existed on January 29th. It's not a question, it's just... we provide that in the report, and so we're not going to talk about it, but I want to make sure that folks are aware of that. Certainly there are several trainees in the process, but we are at a lower number than we are today that are operational. With respect to the facility level, I do want to get into that. Talk about a little bit on, it was a level 10 facility, now it's a level 9. Why was it changed?
It was due to a change in the way they computed traffic counts.
So they had traffic counts for Potomac Tracon, they had traffic counts for the tower, which included helicopters. And at some point they said, you know what, we're going to give all those counts to Potomac Tracon. We're going to take it away from DC Tower. Once they took those counts away, the level decreased to a 9.
That is correct, and Potomac's increased to a 12.
And Potomac's increased to a 12. Here's my question. Is there a difference between the traffic that Potomac Tracon handles and the amount of traffic DCA Tower handles, or is it the same traffic?
They're still operating the same traffic in the same manner they were prior to the change.
Exactly. So this change was made, they downgrade the facility. Obviously you're talking about things like cost of living and other things like that. But from a safety standpoint, how does that decreasing a facility, a tower level decrease safety? How does it impact safety?
As we mentioned in the report, the biggest thing that happens there is they cannot attract the experience or get the talent into the facility that is needed to run a very complex air traffic control operation. This
is the most complex airspace, one of the most, in the entire United States. And I'm not minimizing the experience of tower personnel at DCA Tower, but if you're going to attract personnel and have the most highly experienced personnel, you want a higher level facility. Why? Because they're paid by facility level. So the higher facility number, the more pay you get. In this case, everyone in the tower knows this tower is essentially treated as a training facility. You come in, you do a little bit of time, then you go out after you get your time because you want to go get paid at a level 10, 11, 12 facility. So it is a pass-through. They can't attract people here, which is a problem, and which is why we're making some recommendations on that. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Soper, is there a minimum distance between converging aircraft where a controller can approve a request for pilot-applied visual separation, or do controllers have the latitude to approve requests for the pilot-applied visual separation whenever they deem appropriate?
So when a controller is going to approve the application of visual separation, they must have approved required standard separation prior to that. So in the case of DCA, they're a Class Bravo airspace between a helicopter and a VFR helicopter and an IFR fixed wing. They would be required to have 1.5 miles of separation or 500 feet vertical separation, and before up until the point they approve visual separation.
Okay, and so after the pilot-applied visual separation is approved in Class B airspace, you said it's the minimum step's 1.5 miles and 500 feet, correct?
Not after it's
vertically
approved, prior to approving it. Once it's approved, then it becomes the pilot's responsibility for that distance.
Is there a distance in there that if they decrease that range, that's something the controller has to do at that point?
No.
Okay. So when would a controller make a safety alert?
Anytime the controller observes an aircraft that they believe to be in unsafe proximity to terrain or another aircraft.
And there's not a designated distance or vertical separation for that, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct, okay. What does a safety alert entail?
Safety alert would include the words in a case of between two.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. You are watching Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus here in Hampton Roads, Virginia. We'll be back with more from this hearing and other things that are happening at the moment on the other side of this break. Okay, thank you for sticking with us here on Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. Let's go back to that hearing. NTSB giving its final findings on that deadly midair collision a year ago in D.C.
Communication between the controller and Pat 25, was that an appropriate safety alert?
It was not a safety alert by definition, but it was an attempt at the time to deconflict.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Inman.
You have an answer for me, Ron? Or you haven't maybe had a chance? Sorry.
I do have an answer for you. According to the STARS maintenance replay, the PSA Flight 5342 was at 400 and PAT 25 was at 200. The moment targets merged, we had 400 and 300.
And so the controller, if they were looking at their scope, would have seen that, at least indicated on the scope, that it was 100 feet or approximately 100 feet, depending on the averaging of the recommended route maximum altitude?
Well, it had actually been at 200 feet for a brief time there where he was at 200 right up until he was at 300, then 200 for a little bit, and then came up to 3 right when targets merged.
Okay. So, and that would have made a conflict alert, correct?
The conflict alert was active at that time, yes.
So I think in your research, I believe in the 30 minutes prior to this accident, we have 18 controller radio transmission where conflict alert is going off. Does that sound accurate?
It is accurate.
And that actually appears to be 5 separate interactions that were occurring.
We had, well, not for the full 30 minutes. We were only able to get replay information for 18 minutes prior, but in the 18 minutes leading up to it, there were 5 separate instances of conflict alert that resulted in 9 times there was a transmission with it in the background. You could hear it.
So in that 18 minutes, there were that many times, and that would have been heard in the entire tower cab?
Yes.
So I go back to the supervisor. If they're hearing a number of conflict alerts continually happening, should they not take action to say, is this a trend, or is this just become a nuisance and they just avoid it?
They should, and I think that's exactly why, Dr. Wilson has mentioned previously, we specifically have a rec in this area there's a potential for complacency to happen or for nuisance alerts, and to try to fix that, we have a recommendation to actually adjust the conflict alert system logic.
We actually took we visited the tower last month. I know Member Graham and I did, and tried to see it in almost the exact same moonlight that was occurring on the night of the accident. Can I take you back to that? And
yes.
The question I have, and it was on the simulation that was being done, and the pictures indicated these monitors that were hanging from the ceiling. And if you look very closely, as you look at the converging paths, it's almost that the monitors are blocking the ability to see, depending on how high or short or tall you are. Is that a problem in just a tower configuration issue?
We looked at that, and actually I'm going to let Dr. Wilson speak to that because she has some information in that area.
I think it's just important to note that those monitors are movable, so they can be adjusted. And also when we talked to the controllers who were on duty, everyone said that they had no issue identifying both aircraft, that there were no limitations in them being able to see. So they didn't feel that the monitors were in a position that blocked their view from monitoring both aircraft.
Okay. And during that tour, Brian, did we talked about whether the morale and the staffing had increased, or at least the perception of the training for that tower, correct?
Yes.
During that discussion, did we hear anything about any other towers that might be having the same issues that DCA was having at the time of the crash?
I don't recall specific ones, but I do remember maybe 1 or 2 of the people from the FAA just kind of socializing that there's several, there's facilities across the NASA experiencing staffing problems and training deficiencies and the ability to staff appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's my concern, as we were talking about. They may be getting the time and attention and the training, but is there other places in the United States? Are we going to sit here 5 years from now and say the data was there 5 years ago? Because we know now the data, the people were raising the concerns. People were saying this was dangerous 5-10 years ago, and nobody was really listening. My concern is this somewhere else in the country, and do we know that they're getting the proper resources?
Our hope, staff's hope, is the recommendations that we have in these specific areas will not just be focused on DCA, and the air traffic organization will organically look at that and say we need to look everywhere because it does apply.
How's their track record been in the past? Come on, Brian, this is your chance.
Not great.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I actually want to ask along the lines of where Member Inman was, because I do have this question about the operations supervisor. It was on speaker, all the conversations. I mean, all the communications going back and forth. He took a call to then reduce essentially miles and trail and approve that reduction by Potomac Tracon. And I want to point out, you know, something in our report. In the 20 minutes before the accident, the total number of aircraft the local controller was handling fluctuated between 7 and 12. At about 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, he said he was feeling a little overwhelmed. The operations supervisor said it was totally fine, no problem. I was a little bit surprised by that. I mean, even if you have procedures in place on decombining, you've got, how do you even capture to one person, he's fine, to that local controller who's busy, 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 and maybe doesn't have 2 seconds to say, hey, let's deconflict, while the operations supervisor is listening to all of this. Everybody in the tower is hearing it. I mean, how is that not complacency? I mean, we talk about reduced alertness and vigilance, but I raised this earlier about, is it complacency? You just mentioned complacency, actually, Mr. Soper, in your answer to Member Inman.
I do agree. I do believe, and I mean, I think that staff believes there was complacency occurring in that tower on some level. But again, not to keep going back to them, but that's actually the primary reason for our focused recommendation in the area of giving them the tools that they should need, the requirement to log when they combine positions. So there's some sort of accountability and tools available to the supervisor to be able to make better decisions and understand what their true responsibilities are while they're there, instead of just kind of, here you go, you got it. He had received very little supervisory training, from what was documented from the FAA, to prepare him for that job. And so we made recommendations there. We hope would improve that.
Well, I think when we get to those findings and recommendations, I may have some more questions on that. You talked about, Member Graham had asked about what are essentially merging target procedures, where you do issue a safety alert. At what point, and Member Graham had asked about a communication, you know, at first it was, do you have visual on that? Do you have visual on that CRJ? First of all, you can't distinguish between a CRJ 700 and anything else in the dark with night vision goggles at that point. But at 8:47 and 41.9 seconds, the communication of pass behind the CRJ was made.
Yes.
Okay, so 8:47:41, then the collision is 8:47:59, so we've got about 18 seconds in between. Is that when that safety alert, should that safety alert been issued instead of pass behind the CRJ? Is that when, I'm asking when that should have been issued?
So from the stuff there, the time in which the safety alert should have been issued was when he first asked him, do you still have that CRJ in sight?
Okay, so 8:47:39 seconds. So that provides about 20 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. My last question is, given that apparently no one we interviewed was aware of routine close encounters of helicopters other than people in the tower, was any organization in your opinion, effectively monitoring the potential for the risk of a mid-air collision between military helicopters and civilian aircraft in that area?
I believe that's going to be discussed with some depth in the third panel today.
In the third panel.
Yes,
we'll go
ma'am.
with that back in the third panel, and Dr. Price, thank you for that. Okay. Do you have any additional questions? You have one more. Member Graham.
Let's talk about the supervisor at the time. This was brought up about the situational awareness. What did they say in the interview when asked about how many helicopters they thought were on frequency at the time?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the supervisor only recalled one helicopter.
But yet, leading up to it, there were 5.
It varied between
that's
3 and
considerably
5.
different. Yeah, the loss of situational awareness, I'd say. Thank you. That's all I have.
Member Inman?
I've got just a little bit of follow-up, and I want to go back to the helicopter route structure itself. And this was a little bit baffling to me that we got so many different answers from the FAA. Is there a maximum altitude?
A lot of interesting stuff coming out of this. Again, this is that live NTSB hearing over the deadly mid-air collision back last year, a year ago, 2 days from now, with Thursday marking the anniversary. 67 people died in that, 60 passengers and 4 crew members aboard that American Airlines flight, and then 3 soldiers on a helicopter when that collided. Again, the deadliest plane crash on American soil in more than 2 decades. But you heard some of the questions there about what did we know? What did we know? What concerns were there prior to this happening January of last year? And there's some interesting aspects to this because there were people sounding an alarm about the traffic around that particular airport. Of course, we're talking about Reagan National. And among those who were sounding the alarm were Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, both here from Virginia, who were expressing concerns about the number of flights that were heading in and out of Reagan National. So I know, Sarah, I'll bring you in real quick here, because you were doing a lot of research. I remember, obviously, we all remember that day. But I remember the conversation where we had the meeting where you came in and you had been following particularly Mark Warner's tweets over the last year or so. He had already had a lot of concerns that something maybe like this could happen.
Yeah, when the crash happened, it rang a bell in my head because I follow the senators on X, and for months I had been seeing tweets from both Warner and Kaine, but mostly Warner, where they were talking about how they thought that Reagan was over capacity on flights, and they were talking about specifically how they kept adding more and more flights. So just a few of the ones from before the crash from Mark Warner. Here's one. He said, anyone who has been to Reagan National recently knows the airport is absolutely at capacity and not equipped for the traffic of more huge flights. Another one, they spoke on the Senate floor a few times too before the crash. Specifically, I think they really doubled down on the calls to, ease up on the flights at Reagan after there was a near miss in April before the January crash.
In April of 2024.
Yeah.
In April 2024.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that there had been 85 near misses
in 3 years.
In the 3 years before the crash. So we also have, let's see, another one. He again says DCA is absolutely at capacity. Out-of-region senators shouldn't meddle with our airports by adding even more huge flights to an already overextended airport. Delays at one airport lead to delays at another. DCA is already one of the most crowded and delayed runways in the country. Why would we create more problems here and across the country by forcing more flights onto the tarmac? So those were just a few. I think Kaine also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm looking through some of my research from last year. At least 5.
And
tweets.
What was interesting, they had a letter that they wrote jointly with some other leaders, and they shared it with the FAA about their concerns. And as they were calling for fewer flights, they're also noticing that some other leaders, lawmakers, are trying to push for more flights coming out of there, and even seeing their responses to that when they were having it on X. But this was Kaine here. We quoted him in the story saying that these flights would make it easier for some members of Congress to fly home, but there's just one problem. Because of this busy runway, adding more flights would come at a risk of passenger safety and flight delays, neither of which are acceptable. That was written May the previous year before this collision took place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I believe and I might be mistaken, but I believe that DCA is the preferred airport for members of Congress.
I do believe you're correct. Yes, that's why they were speaking to this for sure. Yeah. So obviously tragedy did unfortunately strike, and today this hearing is diving into that. We're going to take a quick break. We're trying to get a little bit more of it before we get out of the stream at noon, but we do want to take one more break, and we'll be right back with more Live Impact News. All right, thanks for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. We're going to wrap up our show here in the last 10 minutes. We'll show at least use the last 10 minutes back in that hearing. A lot of interesting information and questions being asked here of the NTSB after that deadly collision a year ago in Washington, D.C. So let's go ahead and we'll wrap up the final 10 minutes or so of our stream here watching this live hearing.
Break. If we could come back at 12, we'll come back at 12. We'll start again at 12. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like they're going to take a break, which is fine. We've been holding on this. I think they started around 9 o'clock this morning, so they almost went 3 hours straight there, and they'll probably come back. And, you know, there are family members of those who died in that crash who are in the audience. It's a public hearing open to the public. And, you know, the NTSB had already said that several factors played a role into this. We heard some of them in the question and answering today. And among those was the fact that that helicopter, that military helicopter, was flying 78 feet higher than it should have that day. That was a part of all of this. Again, that collision between the American Airlines flight and the Army Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River, as we look at images there from that day. And I just remember, man, waking up to that information and just being absolutely devastated as we carried it live on Daybreak, you know, the coverage that entire morning. And just thinking about all the families of the victims that day. Obviously, for people who fly, Sarah, we've all been on a plane. I was just in a plane the other day. And these are things that you think about as a worst case scenario, a nightmare situation that we haven't seen anything like this in decades here on American soil. So the fact that they're looking into this, I think even beyond those who were directly impacted because they lost a loved one or they work in aviation, there are a lot of people who have really invested interest in learning what happened because they get on and off of planes throughout the year a lot. And so finding out exactly what happened means a lot, particularly for an airport as busy as Reagan National.
Yeah, I was thinking about this after working in news for as long as I have. There are not a lot surprises me anymore, but occasionally this is one of those stories where I woke up and I saw the news and I was like, wow, that's insane. Another story that comes to mind is the Baltimore, the bridge collapse. When I saw that video, I was in shock. And it just, when you go to an airport, you think that you are in good hands and that you're safe. And to learn that there were so many near misses before the crash and even after the crash, it was very, it was just unsettling.
85 near misses in 3 years before this crash took place, including one back in April of the year prior in 2024. A Southwest flight and a JetBlue plane nearly collided, stopping just a few hundred feet from each other. That was on the DCA runway. Obviously, these two aircrafts were in the air when it happened. And a lot of conversation has come out of this. We were talking about the senators from Virginia, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, and others. They ended up signing a letter and sending it to the FAA before this crash even happened about their concerns about the traffic coming out of Reagan National. But we've also seen after all of this, I remember the moments in which Ted Cruz was surrounded by, I believe, family members. This was months ago now, and they were speaking to present some form of legislation that would have required certain equipment on military helicopters. You know, one of the things that was questioned was, okay, how did these two aircrafts not know that the other was in the vicinity? And the questions came into, you know, there are requirements for passenger planes that they absolutely have to have this certain radar and technology that's on there. But it wasn't necessarily a requirement for all military aircrafts to have it and have it on to be detected. And so there's been questions and pushes to kind of get things changed in that regard so that there's better communication. And then also just from the route itself with, I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but there's been a lot of conversation too about helicopters even now flying within that certain space there around the airport. So we knew there was going to be a lot of changes that had to be made, particularly with and surrounding Reagan National. But the questions now too within this NTSB report, the final findings, is not just for that airport, but what changes are going to be happening broadly, you know, more broad perspective, so that people who are getting in an airplane anywhere, you know, aren't thinking about this. And I guess it is, again, you have to say, we haven't seen anything like this in more than 20 plus years, you know, to the extent of what we're looking at. So we're not talking about something that happens on the regular, even though it did seem like in the last 2 years, Sarah, there are a lot of reports about plane crashes. A lot of those were private, smaller aircrafts that have crashed or had some kind of issues where they've had to make emergency landings, but nothing like this with a passenger plane here in American soil, and clearly with a collision with a military helicopter. So just a lot to take in, but we wanted to make sure. I'm glad we were able to take that for most of the stream here today, at the moment. So speaking of flights in a very different way, I want to go ahead and show you live too. Thank you. You already are reading my brain, reading my mind, Sarah. We are expecting, I don't know if that shot is frozen though. I think there we go. It looked like it, but we had it up there. It looks like they have now taken it down, but I was just going to show you the moments in which President Trump was going to be leaving from Washington, D.C. in Air Force One there on his way to Iowa at the moment. The president and the administration, very much so. A lot of questions right now, not necessarily Iowa, but out of Minnesota, particularly in Minneapolis, as we now have the second deadly shooting of an American citizen there on the ground at the hands of an ICE agent. This one, a 37-year-old ICU nurse who worked for Veterans Affairs Clinic. We're talking about that man right there, Alex Preddy, who was killed days ago by an ICE patrol officer. And now there's a lot of pressure coming in from both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, on the Trump administration's portrayal of what happened that day and portrayal of Mr. Preddy and what people are seeing actually shown on video footage. There's been video evidence that has surfaced over the last several days since that shooting on Saturday that has shown a very different picture than what was originally communicated by some of the top Trump officials out of the White House about this situation. And right now we're seeing, again, a bipartisan push from both, including Republicans and very well-known Republican supporters who are pushing back on this idea that Preddy had intentions to harm the ICE agents because he was armed. And that was one thing that was repeatedly said, including at one point, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said that he brandished a weapon, though video evidence shows that that did not happen. We do not have any proof of that taking place. We do have a package, a story that I think we have time to air here, that we'll air to kind of catch you up to speed as we have just a few more minutes left in this stream.
He's sending in his top guard, and really it's escalating because we just want to be left alone.
City and state leaders in Minnesota, as well as residents in Minneapolis, reacting to news the Trump administration is changing its immigration enforcement leadership in the city.
Good riddance. Couldn't have came sooner.
This amid growing outcry after federal agents shot and killed protester Alex Preddy on Saturday. President Donald Trump signaling new willingness to work with Democratic state officials. Trump said Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called him, saying, quote, "It was a very good call and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength." Walz described the call as productive and said the president agreed to look into reducing the number of federal agents in Minnesota. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said he also spoke with Trump and told the president his main request is that the immigration crackdown in the city be brought to an end. Meanwhile, some who witnessed Preddy's killing are sharing more details about what they saw.
I mean, the thing that stood out to me was that he was calm. There was no way that he was the one escalating this.
Amid ongoing protests and the growing memorials to Preddy, there was also a heartening moment of kindness as some Minnesota National Guard members handed out donuts and coffee to protesters.
I think that's true Minnesota energy. This is all about community.
I'm Reed Binion reporting.
And Border Czar Tom Homan is headed to Minneapolis to speak with the officials there in the state to try to smooth things over at this point. So we will see what comes out of that, the latest there in Minnesota. We do want to mention this before we get off of the air, that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. The U.S. Holocaust Museum says 6 million Jews died at the hands of Nazis. Now, January 27th, this day also marks the day that Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated all the way back in 1945. Historians estimate nearly 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, died at Auschwitz during the less than 5 years of its existence. May we never forget what took place. With that, we want to say thank you so much for joining us for this live stream on Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. Next, we'll have 13 News Now at noon with Ashley Smith. Remember, you can always find us by downloading 13 News Now Plus, particularly if you're watching us on YouTube right now. Sarah and I will be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow, but you can catch another episode of Live Impact News with Connor Reel and Nia Campbell at 1 o'clock this afternoon.